All right, everyone, buckle up, because today we're diving into some pretty fascinating territory. We're talking George Washington, but not the guy on the dollar bill.
Right.
We're going deeper.
Yeah, it's funny how we kind of put those founding fathers, especially Washington, up on a pedestal.
Oh, totally. Textbook version, the whole 9 yards.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And to really, I think, get a grip on their impact, we got to look at the messy stuff, the
Yeah.
contradictions. That's what makes this source you found so interesting, actually.
Yeah, it really struck me early on how this source paints this picture of Washington as the only highly wise guy for the job.
Yeah.
You know, like president had to be him. The trust he'd earned, not just like winning the revolution, but stepping down afterwards, it's huge.
It's a point that's often overlooked, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, that single act, giving up that power, it echoes through history.
hmm
Set the stage, really, for how we think about democracy working at all.
It's like he was inventing the rules as he went along. And this source, it doesn't just stop at him stepping down. It talks about all these little things he did
Yeah.
to make the presidency, like, respectable. The standards we just take for granted now.
Absolutely. Like, think about presidents addressing Congress that wasn't a given.
Yeah.
That was Washington realizing the power of that image,
Yeah.
showing a united front. And let's be real, managing public image, that's only become more important, right?
Oh, totally. And it all started with him.
In many ways, yes.
You know what else blows my mind? The cabinet.
Yes.
This whole system, such a basic part of how we understand government, it was basically his idea.
Pretty remarkable when you think about it. And the source makes a really compelling case, this cabinet system. Innovative, sure, but it also kind of baked in this, well, ambiguity, I guess, into how presidents lead. And we still see that today.
Ambiguity, how so? I'm not sure I follow.
Well, think about it. Throughout history, you've got presidents who stack their cabinets with their buddies, right? Others, they want the most experienced people, doesn't matter the relationship. This flexibility, that's Washington's precedent, for better or worse.
Huh, that's a good point. And that reminds me of something else this source gets into, Washington's 2 retirements. Not something you hear about often,
Right.
but it really shows you how he thought about power.
It's a key insight and really gets to the heart of why this deep dive is so important. It challenges the simple stories. That first retirement, after the second term, he cemented the two-term thing, something we took for granted for centuries.
Shows he understood it's not just about holding power, right?
Mhm.
But knowing when to let go. Still relevant.
Very much so. But here's where it gets interesting, the second retirement. The context around it paints a very different picture.
Yeah.
And honestly, it reveals a more complicated side of Washington, one that, well, maybe contradicts that legacy he built.
Oh, okay, now you've got me hooked. Tell me more about this second retirement. Why was it so different?
All right, so it's 1798, right? The U.S., still a teenager basically, and things are getting tense with France.
Quasi-war, right. I always forget that one.
Yeah, exactly. And who do they call on to, lead the charge?
Mr. Reliable, George Washington. Makes sense.
Right. The guy who had already walked away from power, not once, but twice.
Yeah, but I bet he had some conditions this time around.
You're catching on. It wasn't just duty calls on there.
Yeah.
The source really highlights this. Washington, he agreed to come back, but on his terms. And this wasn't just where the troops go. This gets at the heart of how he saw the presidency.
Okay, lay it on me. What do you want?
First demand, he's staying put at Mount Vernon. No rushing to the White House or, whatever they had back then.
Interesting. I mean, I guess that makes some sense, right? Projecting stability, staying in familiar territory.
Sure, but remember, no Zoom calls back then. This is snail mail, slow communication while you're trying to run a war. The source argues this really weakened the presidency, even if it was understandable.
Oh, I bet his second condition didn't help things either.
Nope. Washington wanted to handpick his officers. Specifically, he wanted Hamilton as his number 2.
Oh boy, Hamilton, talk about a powder keg. That was not going to sit well with Adams.
Understatement.
Eh.
They were practically sworn enemies by this point. Yet, Washington, knowing this, throws Hamilton right into the mix.
Kind of manipulative, right? Like, even in retirement, he's pulling strings.
It's a question that still gets debated. Did he genuinely think this was best for the nation? Or was it about maintaining influence?
Really makes you question the whole selfless leader narrative, huh? But, I mean, we can't deny his impact, especially on how the presidency works.
No doubt. The precedents he set, even unintentionally, they're still debated today. It makes you wonder, could he see the future? Would he have changed things?
Time travel history, always a fun thought experiment. But before we go too far down that rabbit hole, there's this whole other side to Washington we can't ignore.
Ah, yes. the slavery question. Can't talk about this era without it.
And this source, to its credit, it goes there.
Oh, absolutely. It digs into the contradictions,
Yeah.
even within Washington himself.
Yeah, it's one of those things you just can't avoid when talking about this period, you know?
Nope. To try and separate a figure like Washington from slavery. I mean, it wouldn't be honest, would it?
Oh.
Especially given what we're reading here.
Totally. And look, this isn't about judging the past by today's standards, right?
Right.
It's about understanding the whole picture.
Right.
And this source, it doesn't shy away from the duff stuff.
You know, what really struck me was how they frame Washington's story alongside what slavery was at the time, owning slaves. It wasn't like he was unusual, right? For his position, it was almost expected. And here's where it gets really interesting. They delve into his will. The decision he made about the people he enslaved, that was unheard of.
You're talking about him freeing them when he died. I've always found that interesting, but to be honest, I never really looked into the details.
It's a huge detail, and the source really highlights that. It wasn't just a line in his will like, oh yeah, free those folks. He had to make it work financially. It took planning.
Really?
Oh, absolutely. His wife was inheriting Mount Vernon,
Yeah.
right? And all the enslaved people who worked there. He wanted them freed, but he also couldn't bankrupt his own estate.
Wow. So even doing the right thing, it was complicated.
It shows how deeply slavery was woven into everything back then, right? Even someone like Washington, who clearly saw the injustice, he still had to play this intricate game to make things right. That's what makes his will so radical.
Yeah, it really was a different time.
It really was. And the source points out not everyone was happy about it either. Even some of his own family pushed back against freeing the enslaved people. Can you imagine that pressure? But he still did it.
So on the one hand, you've got this powerful statement in his will, right? This acknowledgement that slavery was wrong. But, and there's always a but, isn't there? His actions during his life don't always line up.
That's the heart of the matter, isn't it? The source doesn't let us off the hook. Yes, he arranged for their freedom after his death, but he also participated in that system, benefited from it his whole life.
It's tough because he could have freed them while he was alive, but he didn't.
And that's the kind of complexity that makes history so gripping, don't you think? It's not always heroes and villains, black and white. It's these gray areas, trying to understand people within their time, flaws and all.
That's why I love these deep dives. Gets you thinking. We started out thinking we knew Washington, right? The serious dude on the money.
Right.
But we've uncovered way more than that. A man of contradictions, visionary, but also stuck in the thinking of his time.
And that, I think, is the key takeaway, isn't it? History isn't about easy answers or neat narratives. It's about sitting with the uncomfortable stuff, realizing that even our heroes were human, shaped by their world.
Leaves you with more questions than answers sometimes, but that's okay.
It's better than okay, it's essential.
It really makes you wonder what other stories are hidden just beneath the surface, waiting to be found.
And that's the beauty of it all, isn't it? There's always more to learn. So
Yeah.
keep asking questions, keep digging. Who knows what you'll discover?